evening, good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Based on the location of your participation and when you are witnessing this interview, I welcome you all to the virtual interview on age diversity in collaboration with Rising Arbitrators Initiative, RAI. We have with us today the interviewee, Ms. Céline Greenberg, who is a founding partner at Mayer Greenberg. So we are joined by another interviewer, Mr. Alexander Leventhal, who is an off-counsel from Quinn Emanuel. And we will be having the interview session in which both of us will be interviewing Ms. Céline. Alex, over to you.
Thank you so much, Abinash, and a special thanks to AIAC as well for this very exciting collaboration. Céline, let's start at the very beginning. What inspired you to pursue a career in arbitration, and tell us a little bit about the adventure that you've had since then.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you very much to AIAC and RAI for having me. I had to say, how would I describe my journey to date? Very exciting, a very happy journey. I came to international arbitration in a kind of indirect way. What inspired me initially was a passion for public international law, which I studied in France and in England. I was really fascinated by public international law, and when I did my LLM in England, I participated in the Jessup Cup, and our team did quite well, but I didn't know how to translate that into a career, because it seemed to me that the only possible jobs there would be Minister of Foreign Affairs or ICJ judge or member of the UN's ILC. And all these jobs were for old people. And I was quite young. So I was a bit lost. During my study in England, during my LLM, I was doing a bit of research, and I found some published awards in investment treaty arbitrations. And there I saw some discussions of the Vienna Convention and the articles on state responsibility, all these public international law principles that I've been studying. And I saw that in those arbitrations, the parties were represented by big law firms like Boyton Case and Freshfields. So I was very excited that it seemed to be that if you become an arbitration practitioner, you can practice some public international law. And so that's why I pursued that route. But then, of course, life had its ways, and it took me 9 years of practicing purely commercial arbitration before I started working on some investment treaty work. But I have to say, worked out all right. I loved commercial arbitration, and I have zero regrets as to what happens.
And tell us, in your view, what do parties actually look for when appointing an arbitrator?
So the question is what parties look for. The answer is parties look for an arbitrator who will make them win. I think that's the only thing that the parties really care about and think about. And in their search for that arbitrator, trying to predict the future as to whether a certain person will make them win, they sometimes look for the wrong things. And I think in my experience, most of the times, parties and sometimes their counsel, even experienced counsel, can look for the wrong things. And what do I mean by that? I mean that they often tend to focus on subject matter specialization, stardom, or personal connections. And that's not what's going to ensure a good process and a good outcome. I find that counsel also look for someone who will make their client win, but they also look for someone who is likely to reward them, to reward the appointment in some ways, in the form of future work or recommendations. But what can you say? It's completely natural. You cannot expect parties to act otherwise, especially because you need to keep in mind that when parties come to arbitration, most of the time, they are there because they think they have a good legal position. If they were convinced they had a bad legal position, they would have settled or they would have not got into the dispute. So they think they want to win and they deserve to win. They should win. So they are looking for somebody who will reach the right result in their view. I think it's unheard of that somebody will take a step back and say, I'm looking for somebody who will see through the weaknesses of my case and who will apply the law correctly, and if necessary, will make me lose. That's not the way people look at it. It's also quite rare to see parties thinking about, oh, I need to appoint somebody to promote diversity. That's what I'm trying to do. All of these considerations come once you've identified a pool of people that you think will make you win.
Thank you, Céline. My question to you is, do you think age and experience plays a vital role in the appointment process of an arbitrator?
Do they play a role, a vital role now? I would say increasingly. And in my view, experience is the most important. And when you're thinking of age, you really should think of age not in itself, but has a further indication, if it can give you some, as to the experience of a person. But you shouldn't look at things in an oversimplified way. An old, inexperienced person is not a better arbitrator than a young one who has more relevant experience. But of course, experience comes with time, and you can't beat that. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Because in my experience, and perhaps yours the same, even some experienced arbitrators are crap. So you have to know the person personally. And also a notion that is not discussed very often, but I find very relevant, a little bit between age and experience, is a notion of personal and intellectual maturity. That comes to people at different times of their lives, at different ages. And personal and intellectual maturity is very important to perform a judicial function, such as acting as arbitrator. And so I would say that what's really vital is to find somebody who is sufficiently mature, sufficiently experienced to act as arbitrator. And for some people, that is reached at a younger age than for others. So you need to take a very personal approach.
With that, if I may ask you, if you had to pick one skill that is more important to have as an arbitrator, what would you say it is? And do you think young practitioners and arbitrators have that skill? Or what could they do to cultivate the skill set that you would identify?
It's very hard to pick just one. So I have to pick two. One is good legal skills, very good legal skills. And the second one is intelligence in all shapes that it comes to, including intelligence for relationships. And yes, young people have those skills, can have those skills. They are certainly not reserved to the older groups. I find that conducting an arbitration is very much about managing people and people's expectations. It's not only about reaching the right result. Of course, you need to get to the right result, but you need to bring people there in the right way too. And I guess when you're just starting off in your career, sometimes you can miss that. You can focus too much on the substance and lose sight of the other parameters and of the need to make sure that nobody loses face in the process, nobody in the tribunal or among the counsel or party representatives or the witnesses or the institution that manages the case. Because when people feel like they're losing face, or they feel humiliated, or they feel attacked, they can be defensive, they can act irrational, and that's really counterproductive for the process. And if you get to the right results, but people do not feel that it was the right process, sometimes it's a failure, irrespective of the fact that the legal issues were decided properly.
Céline, following on from Abinash's question, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in obtaining your first appointment?
So my personal experience, my biggest challenge, I think, was dealing with institutions. I've been lucky to have been appointed arbitrator by several institutions, and I find that in some of those early appointments, I felt, rightly or wrongly, treated a bit like a baby arbitrator, not a real arbitrator. And there can be some, communications or practices that you haven't really seen, haven't really witnessed in your career when you were acting as counsel, or where I acted as tribunal secretaries in dozens of arbitrations with different arbitrators involved. And I felt that I was treated a bit differently because people assume that, oh, this must be her first or second appointment, that she's very young. So we need to direct her a bit. And that's quite hard to find the right approach to that sort of conduct. And I would say, if anybody is experiencing that, keep a cool head and turn a blind eye. That would be my advice.
And what are some of the things that you wished someone had told you?
I guess it would relate again to institutions. And it is actually something that my husband said to me a few weeks or months ago, and I wish he told me earlier. Treat the institutions like a client. And I think it's absolutely right. Institution can do a lot for your career. And when you're acting as arbitrator, they are your client. Treat them like a client.
Céline, with that, how would you describe your very first appointment experience?
I would describe it as exciting and challenging. As you would expect, it was a small dispute between unsophisticated clients represented by young and inexperienced counsel. And it was handled by a very small institution, also with not a lot of experience. And so the dispute was about the amicable liquidation of a company. So the shareholders were in dispute in respect of how the company had been run and how the liquidation process had been run to date, and how much money they were each entitled to at the end of the liquidation process. I felt completely out of my league. I had never had a case about liquidation. I did not know how is one supposed to liquidate a company. And it was very hard for me to roll up my sleeve and look at the accounts and start saying, okay, this is wrong, and basically make findings as to these companies' accounts and determine what was due to each partner. But I got there eventually.
What are the advantages or benefits of appointing a young arbitrator?
At least two come to mind. More dedication, cheaper rates, and that counts for something. I have to say that my experience as tribunal secretary, I have seen some renowned arbitrators taking certain matters too lightly, and especially co-arbitrators. And that's a shame. You don't get that from young arbitrators. They're super motivated, super hardworking, and they really do the work.
Céline, what are the advantages in your experience of having a generationally diverse tribunal?
Well, I have to be fully transparent there. I don't think I have had many experiences, many cases with a generationally diverse tribunal. A lot of the time when I sit as tribunal secretary, the tribunals tend to be composed of mostly superstar arbitrators, really renowned, really experienced. When I act as arbitrator, so far it has been as a sole arbitrator. exclusively. But I remember one case in which, or two cases, in which one member of the tribunal was significantly less experienced than the other two. And these tribunals worked great. And that younger member was a really good member of the tribunal and really helped raise, the standard and was very involved in deliberations and ensured that the issues were really thoroughly discussed between the tribunal. And so I thought it was excellent, absolutely excellent. At the end of the day, the more experienced arbitrators bring their experience, and the younger members, they bring, the motivation, the excitement of being on the tribunal. Like it's something that they're not, they are all starstruck, and it's really an advantage, I find, and it fosters a good decision.
Céline, I have one last question before I turn back to Abinash, and one particular to the Rising Arbitrators Initiative. What advice would you give to young practitioners who are seeking to become rising arbitrators?
Two things again. Number one, work hard. And that's hardly a surprise. And number two, be nice to everyone. I think that being kind and fun to work with goes a very long way.
Céline, I wanted to actually bring you up to speed with something that has recently happened, and that is the launch of the AIAC Guidelines on the standards of practice in international arbitration. And particularly Rule 1B, which says all participants respect all forms of diversity and cultural backgrounds represented in the international arbitration community and refrain from any form of discriminatory conduct. What are your views on that?
Well, I think it's excellent that there is now, a move towards grappling those issues of fostering diversity. It's excellent that people recognize that discrimination is not only, a moral wrong, but it's also a real obstacle to reaching top quality in any sort of work. And so I think all initiatives to promote diversity are really to be applauded. It's only when you write things down, when you speak up, that conducts change and minds can change. And so all these little steps help.
Thank you for that, Céline. And my last question to you is, what are your thoughts on initiatives such as the AIAC's Diversity in Arbitration Week in promoting age diversity in international arbitrations?
I think it's excellent. I think it really helps us to reflect on how we perceive age when appointing arbitrators. Like I said before, age and experience don't always come together, and you need to really take a more sophisticated approach. Think that Toby Lando received his first appointment when he was 27 years old. So think how much experience he had by the time he was 37, and how that compares with practitioners and have the same age. You really need to look at things for what they are. And some people might be afraid of appointing young arbitrators, but they really should focus on just that, on the experience that they do have. Today, a 35-year-old arbitration practitioner has often had almost 10 years of practice, and sometimes in big international law firms. And they have a very adequate baggage of experience to act as arbitrator, and a much more adequate bag of skills and experience than, say, a 45-year-old person who has devoted their career to real estate. And I say that even if the dispute concerns real estate, you're still better off with the 35-year-old arbitration practitioner than with the 45-year-old real estate specialized lawyer.
Thank you, Céline. Thank you, Alex. And this concludes the interview with Céline Greenberg.
Thank you. Thank you very much.